The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio. And we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And good morning, everybody. This is Ray Hanania here at the Ray Hanania Radio Show, sponsored by Arab News and broadcast on the U.S. Arab Radio Network every Wednesday morning in Detroit on WNZK AM 690 and live in Washington, D.C. on WDMV AM 700 radio, and on Facebook.com/Arab News at the Arab News newspaper Facebook page, which has some 6 million viewers. So we're happy to be there, and we're looking forward to a great discussion this morning. In segment one, we're going to be speaking with Middle East Institute's Senior Vice President and former Ambassador Gerald Feierstein. He's going to discuss with us the situation in Yemen. This past week, President Biden's special envoy to Yemen, Tim Lenderking, announced an additional $160 million in aid to Yemen while criticizing the roles played by Iran and the Houthis. He called the situation in Yemen a dire and one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Later at the bottom of the hour in segment two, we'll speak with Ali Mohamed Khaled, who is a sports editor at Arab News, and we'll be looking at how well Arab athletes performed in the Tokyo Olympics that just ended this past week. Arab athletes first participated in the Olympics when Egypt competed in 1912 in Stockholm. So we're going to take a real quick break here at the Ray Hanania Show, and as soon as we come back, we will introduce you to Ambassador Feierstein and talk about Yemen. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to be right back right after these breaks.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
While we've been staying safe at home, scientists have been on a journey. The destination, a COVID-19 vaccine. This journey began decades ago with research into other coronaviruses. Scientists built from there with months of research and development, cooperation with other experts worldwide, and clinical trials on tens of thousands of volunteers of diverse race, age, and health status. They arrived at a safe, effective vaccine, and hundreds of thousands in Michigan have already been vaccinated. But the next step is ours. We need to get the vaccine when we can. Keep wearing masks correctly and taking precautions until we reach our destination, freedom from COVID-19 and getting back to the lives we love. Discover the facts for yourself at michigan.gov/COVID vaccine. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain. The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio, and we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And welcome back. I'm Ray Hanania, and I'm on the line with Middle East Senior Vice President and former Ambassador Gerald Feierstein. He joins us to discuss the situation in Yemen. Ambassador Feierstein, and I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly.
It's good, yes.
Thank you. He was the U.S. ambassador to Yemen under President Barack Obama from September 2010 to October 2013. And then he served for a few years between 2013 and 2016 as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs in the Department of State, and has a lot of background in this area about Yemen. You wrote recently about, you were kind of reflecting on the campaign trail on President Biden, what he had promised to bring the Yemen conflict to an end, and they reversed what he said was the tough, ill-conceived policy of the Trump administration, and they seemed like they were softballing the approach to Yemen. But then 5 months into it or 6 months into it, they realized that things weren't going the way they thought they would go, and they're back to supporting and pushing the Saudi argument, which is that we have to be tough with the Houthis, who are backed by Iran, and maybe this is a bigger conflict than just, a conflict in Yemen, that it has some bigger dynamics there. Explain all that to us. What happened?
Well, I think that you summed it up pretty well. There was a view here in Washington, and I think more broadly in the West, that the issue was really the Saudi military intervention, the coalition operations in Yemen, and that if you took that out of the equation, that the parties to the dispute, primarily the Houthis and the legitimate government of Abdurrahman Mansour Hadi, would be able to come to the table and reach some kind of an agreement under UN negotiations, under UN auspices, in order to move forward. And so when he was a candidate, as well as in the opening weeks of his term as president, President Biden was very clear in saying that the U.S. strategy would shift away from the Trump approach, which supported the Saudi intervention, and emphasize the support for the UN negotiations, and also press the Saudis to stop their military operations inside of Yemen. And he also appointed Tim Lenderking, career U.S. diplomat, to be our special envoy and to support the UN. But as you said quite correctly, over the last 5 or 6 months, rather than returning to the negotiating table and cooperating with the UN, the Houthis, in fact, have expanded their military operations. They've launched new aggressions inside of Yemen, particularly in Marib Governorate, and also have increased the amount of their cross-border attacks into Saudi Arabia using drones, Scud missiles, and other kinds of weapons to try to threaten Saudi civilian infrastructure. So what we've seen over these past 6 weeks or so, 6 or 8 weeks, is that the administration has been willing to take a harder line with the Houthis and to single them out for responsibility for the failure to negotiate, and also, of course, for increasing military conflict inside of Yemen.
Do you think that this reversal? I mean, everybody always wants to, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but everybody always wants to say, let's give peace a chance. Let's open the door to the other side. That maybe they're going to be reasonable with us, but that assumes that they have an agenda that we think is their agenda, and it doesn't assume the role of outside factors and players like Iran, which really I don't think really gets along with the Gulf very well. So anything that they can do to disrupt that region, I think that's what they're going to do. But was there a moment when you think that they realized that, whoa, wait a minute, this has gotten worse? It's contributed to a worsening situation for the Yemeni people. At what point did they realize that, no, we got to take a tougher stand, that we were in the right direction in the beginning?
Well, I think that, that certainly the Houthi response to the U.S. initiative made it clear that the Houthis weren't willing to stop, and Saudi Arabia, of course, put on the table, along with the UN, put on the table ceasefire initiatives. They offered a comprehensive ceasefire to the Houthis, which was rejected. The UN had tried to negotiate for many months what they called the Joint Declaration, which included a number of points that the Houthis had demanded, including reopening the Sana'a airport, lifting the blockade on the port at Hodeidah, taking some other steps that the Houthis had indicated that they required. But still the Houthis refused to agree to stop the military operations and to return to the table. And so I think that as we saw these cumulative failures on the part of the Houthis to accept a political approach, it became clear to the administration that they needed to take a harder line. And of course, the broader concern is that if the Houthis were to be successful in taking control of Ma'arib Governorate, which, as you know, is the source of much of Yemen's oil and gas supplies. It's also home to well over 1 million internally displaced people who had largely fled from Houthi-controlled areas to an area that was still under the control of the government. So if the Houthis were successful in getting control of Ma'arib, that would fundamentally shift the balance inside of Yemen and make achieving any kind of a political agreement that much more difficult.
It seems that they've recognized that, because they've made a huge push there, I think, to really kind of take over. Are we dealing, in all honesty, are we dealing with the Houthis, or are we dealing with Iran, or are we dealing with some mix of the two? Or is Iran just happening to be there because they just don't like the Gulf? Or what's their role?
Well, it's a very good question, and I'm not sure that there's a very clear answer. I think that early on, again, another shift in the administration policy from Donald Trump to Joe Biden involves Iran specifically, and that was a desire of the administration to return to the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, and to open a channel of communications with the Iranians, hopefully to be able to address some of these other issues that have been areas of concern about Iranian behavior over these years. And there was, I think, a hope as well that the Iranians, in order to help improve the prospects for that negotiation, would also support a political negotiation in Yemen. That Yemen was considered by many people, including me, in all honesty, to be an area that was most open to resolution, because it was not strategically important for Iran. and therefore they could afford to be forward-leaning and helpful in trying to bring the Yemen conflict to an end. That hasn't worked out that way. Again, the issue of what is the relationship between the Houthis and Iran is a little bit unclear, I think, and I've always argued that the fundamental issues that are driving the Houthi position inside of Yemen are by and large Yemeni. It's not that they are a proxy. I've never considered them to be a proxy of Iran, but the fact of the matter is that they're heavily dependent on Iran for their weapons and for a lot of other kinds of support, and therefore they can't afford to ignore Iranian views and Iranian positions. And there is certainly a view, a legitimate view, I think, that the Iranians are linking what happens in Yemen to the state of their negotiations in Vienna with the U.S. about the nuclear deal, and that the Iranians see Yemen in a way as a pressure point on the United States to be more forward-leaning and lifting sanctions and doing other things related to the nuclear problem.
I know a lot of maybe younger listeners may not identify with this, but I know you and I would, back during the late 60s, this idea that if we just softened up with the Viet Cong in Vietnam, if we just showed them that we wanted peace, that yes, we'll all be happy, and we kind of withdrew and basically lost that entire conflict. Is there a threat that in this Yemen area that could happen, again in the Gulf?
Well, I think, there is an interesting parallel in these two things, and that is that within the Houthi movement, there are certainly elements. I wouldn't say that it's all Houthis, but there are certainly elements within the Houthi movement who have this very millennial vision for their role in Yemeni society. There are many Houthis who believe that they are the rightful heirs to the imamate, which was, as you know, a Zaydi Shia government that ruled North Yemen for many, many years, and that they are the heirs to that government, and that they want to reinstall the imamate under their leadership. And so it makes it very difficult if you're dealing with people who believe that they have this God-given right to govern Yemen, to try to negotiate a political agreement that would clearly end up with them having less than total control of the society. So this is a problem. And so you can make that argument that the reason that we couldn't negotiate with the Vietnamese is that the Vietnamese had one objective, which was to govern Vietnam, right. And that they weren't going to stop and they weren't going to accept anything less than complete control. And there are certainly Houthis who believe that. There are other elements within the Houthi movement who are more than willing to negotiate and to reach some kind of a compromise agreement. And so the question is really, what is the balance of forces within the Houthi movement towards those who would accept a negotiated position in Yemeni society versus those who are seeking total control?
What do you think needs to be done, in your opinion? I mean, what if obviously if you were back there as ambassador, and I know you have some influence on this because you have so many years, probably more than a lot of people, in terms of what's happening in Yemen. What do you think needs to be done if you were to advise the president? What do you think he should do?
Well, I think that it is actually what we have written. I wrote a piece with my colleague Fatima Abu al-Asrar, which appeared in War on the Rocks, a blog here in Washington, that basically said that the number one priority at this point has to be ensuring that the Houthis don't succeed in Ma'arib. That until, again, as we discussed, this idea that what we need to do is to strengthen those elements within the Houthi movement who want to negotiate, who want to cooperate with the UN, and reach a negotiated solution. We need to strengthen them and weaken the elements who think that they can still win a military victory. So the first requirement is really to prevent the Houthis from achieving their objectives in Ma'arib, and convincing again the Houthi leadership that there's no military solution. And then, of course, as you know, we have a new UN Special Envoy who's just been named officially within the last few days, Hans Grunberg, who is a Swedish diplomat and is currently serving as the European Union's Special Envoy for Yemen. So he's very familiar with the situation on the ground. He'll be picking up the responsibility for Martin Griffiths, and we'll see what he can bring to the table in terms of new incentives for the parties to return to negotiations. The other point that we've made is that on the ground in Yemen, there are a number of different elements that are working on local solutions, local ceasefires, local prisoner releases, local release of detainees. And we need to do more to support those elements so that even while we're waiting for a comprehensive solution to the problem, we at least can address some of the immediate issues that are so difficult for the Yemenis. And of course, as you said, the U.S. just announced $165 million in new humanitarian assistance and has asked other partners in the international community also to come forward with additional assistance to try to address that critical humanitarian crisis.
And do you think that the UN getting involved will that help? Do you think? I mean, the U.S. I think realizes that we have to be tough. As you point out, we can't allow the Houthis, to militarily win in any of those districts in Yemen. If they do that, what's the point? They would never sit down with us. And I think it'll just my opinion, obviously, that it would just get worse. What role can the UN play to help push this to a resolution, do you think? Or can it, or will it just be interference?
Well, I think that ultimately the UN has an important role to play because they are the only party really that is seen by Yemenis broadly as impartial, as neutral in the negotiation, and therefore they can play that role. The Yemenis coming together on their own would have a great deal of difficulty. And even going back to my own experience in 2011, 2012, although ultimately the Yemenis themselves shaped the initiative that became the GCC initiative, nevertheless, they relied on outside elements, including the diplomatic community, including the U.S. and other embassies in Sana'a, to help facilitate and mediate among the parties, to help them basically come to the agreements that they needed to come to. And I think that the UN can play that role again, that while the ultimate structure of the resolution of the conflict is going to be a Yemeni structure, and it has to be a Yemeni structure, nevertheless, the UN can play that critical role of bringing the parties together, a neutral territory, and allowing them to work out these issues and helping to facilitate the negotiation.
My observation is that this is a bigger issue between Iran and the West. Iran sees an opportunity to provide support to the Houthis, to push them into these military drives that they're targeting in different areas of Yemen. And they're never going to compromise. I mean, it's one thing to say that maybe we can deal with the Houthis because there's some reasonable people maybe with them. But as long as the Iranians are there, can we even expect an end to this conflict? I mean, would Iran allow that? Do they have that much influence over the Houthis to continue this drive?
Well, I do believe that if we get to the point where the Houthis see that their own interests are in favor of reaching an agreement, that they will do that. I think that that the Houthis again are driven primarily by issues inside of Yemen, Yes, they receive a great deal of support from Iran, and they need to listen to the Iranians. But I'm not sure in my own mind that the Houthis would refuse to make an agreement that they want to make because they're getting pressed by the Iranians. And the other reality is that while Iran has certainly been involved over these past 5 or 6 years, unhelpfully, while they have taken advantage of the internal situation inside of Yemen to improve their situation, to insert IRGC and Hezbollah fighters into Yemen, and that they have therefore been able to challenge Saudi security. Nevertheless, they don't have that long history of involvement in Yemen. And the fact of the matter is that the Houthis in Saudi Arabia have been able to work with one another over the years as well. And so it's not necessarily the case that if the Houthis see an advantage in having a stronger relationship with Saudi Arabia versus Iran, that wouldn't be something that they would pursue and that they would agree to. And as we know, and the Saudis have said that they are talking to the Houthis, that these talks have been going on for many years. And there is the possibility at some point that Saudi Arabia and the Houthis may reach some kind of an agreement that would allow the Houthis to move forward and negotiate a resolution inside of Yemen.
Yeah, Iran's role, though, I think is much more imperiling. It just seems hard to believe that Iran would step back and say, okay, yeah, you guys want to end this, go ahead and end it. To them, there must be great benefit to see this happening. I mean, the U.S. and Saudi are the biggest humanitarian donors, I think, to help the victims of this conflict in Yemen. And which leads me to another question I'm hoping to ask. Who else needs to step up to the plate to make this happen? But back to my first point, I don't think Iran wants to see this conflict resolved. Do you think I'm wrong, or am I leaning in the right way, or do you think I'm just too negative toward Iran?
Well, it's hard to say, and is it possible that Iran is linking progress in the conflict inside of Yemen to broader issues of interest to them, primarily the negotiations that are going on in Vienna? As you know, there are also talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran that are being sponsored by the Iraqi government in Baghdad. And certainly Yemen has been on the agenda for those discussions as well. And so, would the Iranians balance their competing interests, maintaining pressure on Saudi Arabia through the Yemen conflict, but also obviously having an interest in seeing a reduction in tensions in the region that would allow them to get some sanctions relief and to do other things that might help their economy. These are balancing issues that Tehran has to be considering. And the other reality is that we actually don't know what the new government in Tehran is going to think about these issues, and how is this new president, Raisi, going to see his way through to developing a policy and a position for Iran. So there are a lot of unknowns out there about where the Iranians are and what the Iranians actually are seeking, and whether or not they would accept as the price for other benefits that they might get, that they would see a reduction in their own influence inside of Yemen.
Yeah, this has been going on, I think, 5 or 6 years. Do you see any hope that this might resolve itself soon, or is there a concern that it's going to get worse before it gets better?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, the Houthis moved into Sana'a in September of 2014, so we're coming up to the 7th anniversary, really, of the beginning of this conflict. I think that again, there had been optimism earlier on in this year that we would be able to push forward on a political resolution through the UN auspices. That has suffered a setback. There's no question that I think people are less optimistic today than they were maybe in January or February. But at the same time, all wars come to an end eventually, and this one will as well. I think that the key right now is once again to convince the Houthis. It may be that the Houthis saw the arrival of the Biden administration and President Biden's statement in February as a signal that they could, in fact, increase their military activities, and that perhaps once again, since the U.S. was pressuring Saudi Arabia to stop its operations, that they would be able to achieve the military victory that they hadn't been able to achieve earlier on. And so it's important to convince them that, in fact, that has not changed and that they're no more able to win militarily today than they were last year or the year before. And if we can do that, if we can convince them that there is no military victory in sight, then perhaps that will shift the balance and bring them back to negotiations, and then hopefully we can see some progress.
So that probably means where we're at today, standing tough, while providing humanitarian aid where it's needed in Yemen. I mean, we are the biggest donors. The U.S., I think, is the largest, followed by the Saudis, and doing that probably is the only way to bring this to a resolution.
I think that's right. You had asked who else can be helpful. There is a Friends of Yemen organization. The UK has always been very deeply involved in Yemen issues. The other permanent members of the UN Security Council, Russia, China, France, all have roles to play. Germany has, over the years, been very influential with Yemen, particularly. They've had a good relationship with the Houthis over the years. So all of these governments can play a role in trying to convince the parties to come back. I think it's really not a question of convincing the Houthi government. I think that they're already there. It's really a question of convincing the Houthis that they need to come back to the table.
All right. My guest this morning, former Yemen Ambassador Gerald Feierstein. Mr. Ambassador, really, it was a real pleasure to have you on the radio show. I enjoyed the conversation. I think you gave us some great insight into a very important conflict that everyone hopes will be brought to an end soon. So thank you for joining us on radio. We appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, Ray, and happy to talk to you anytime.
All right, good. Well, we look forward to having you on again. Hopefully, maybe there'll be peace in our generation. I can't remember the words that Nixon said, but it's just that worries me, that whole look back, to see this. If there was a conflict that ever paralleled more, I think it's this one. But again, that's just my opinion. But Ambassador, thank you so much. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with the sports editor at Arab News, Ali Mohamed Khaled, about Arabs at the Tokyo Olympics. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Imagine you're on a train track. Somewhere miles away, a train is headed your way. You can't see it yet, but it's coming. Slowly but surely. If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may be on the wrong track, and diabetes could be heading your way. Bit by bit, the danger is getting closer and closer. So should you stay on the track you're on now, or move to make a change and reduce your risk? If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may qualify for the National Diabetes Prevention Program in your local community. This one-year program could be the ongoing support you need to put you on the right track. Not only did participants lose weight, they cut their risk of type 2 diabetes in half. Ready to get on board for a healthier future? Learn more about the National Diabetes Prevention Program and what else you can do to manage and prevent diabetes at michigan.gov/diabetes. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
New Dawn Academy provides your kids with a curriculum that's rich in science, technology, engineering, and math.
We want students to really experience what problem solving looks like. What does it mean to build things together? And really working on those analytical skills is what makes New Dawn Academy's program very unique.
This school will certainly provide them with academic excellence, but also state-of-the-art buildings and inviting to students.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Al-Majid Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263. The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio, and we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And welcome back. I'm Ray Hanania here at WNZK AM 690 Radio in Detroit and WDMV AM 700 Radio in Washington, D.C. We are broadcasting live on the U.S. Arab Radio Network at arabradio.us and with our sponsor, Arab News newspaper, on Facebook.com/Arab News, where you can watch and listen to this show. Right now, I want to introduce our next guest, Ali Mohamed Khaled. He is the Dubai-based sports editor and writer for Arab News. And this is a perfect time to bring him on. By the way, he was the director of the documentary Anwar Roma, The Lights of Rome, which tells the story of the UAE's journey to the 1990 World Cup in Italy. So if you get a chance, you want to see that documentary. But Ali Khaled is going to help us understand how well did Arabs do at the Tokyo Olympics. Welcome to the program, Ali.
Hi, Ray. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
A pleasure to have you. I know that this was a big year for women, and kind of a tone I think that was set by Saudi Arabia, opening the doors to women, giving them much more freedoms. And I think we, out of 17 Arab countries at the Olympics that I read, 14 of them were they showcased the role of women. There was probably the largest group of women. How significant was that, do you think, in terms of how well we performed as Arabs?
I think it's obviously very, very significant. I think one of the things that helped showcase just how much we've moved forward in this side of things is that the Olympic Committee for the first time allowed at the opening ceremony 2 flag bearers to be like one male and one female. Right. So like in the past, there's always been like an issue like who takes it, and this time they were able to nominate. And obviously, so as you mentioned, like most of them had a female flag bearer as well. So it gave them like visibility and like for the rest of the world. I think, as you mentioned again, it's probably the most number of female athletes from Arab countries that we've had. Saudi Arabia had 2. Saudi Arabia had like the largest ever delegation of 33 athletes. 11
wow.
individuals. Yeah, it was 11 individuals and 22 from the squad that played in the football tournament. So obviously that skewed towards that. But 2 of them
it's
were
like 12 different competitions, 12 different sports competitions.
Yeah, it's 12 different disciplines. It's actually 9 different sports for Saudi, which is a record. The previous record was 6 in Athens in 2004. So in every sense, I think Saudi Arabia had expanded and backed a lot of its athletes, and you could see that also across lots of other Arab countries in a really, really difficult time when it was not easy to actually train and fund programs. There was quite a few medals in the end as well.
And how did let's talk about the Saudis first, their team. How well did they do? How did everything go?
Well, Ray, I think at the start there was a lot of excitement at the beginning of the tournament, obviously because everyone was looking forward to beginning their different sports and their different competitions and all that. So the first few days, there was a lot of excitement on that. To be expected. Some of them, just obviously didn't perform extremely well. They might have been eliminated early on and all that. But that's kind of to be expected as well. Because they were up against some in certain sports really formidable opponents who have been in many Olympics before. So after that, after a few were eliminated, I think there was a little bit of a, maybe a bit of a lull in the middle of the tournament. But then at the end, there was a flurry of activity, and for all Arab nations, there was quite a few medals. But in particular for Saudi, for one person in particular, Tariq Hamdi, who won a silver in karate, and I mean his story was very, very interesting in that he was really not fancied at all to go far, and he was beating opponents who were far more experienced than him at the Olympic Games. He got to the final against an Iranian opponent, and unfortunately, while leading 4-1 with very little time left, the gold medal was within sight, he got disqualified for dangerous play. So unfortunately, had to settle for silver. But that was, obviously I think that was the high point. That was the only medal Saudi got. There were a few others really, really good Saudis who stood out. I think the rower Hussein Ali Rida deserves a mention because he was really competing with a punctured lung. He was told he shouldn't go to the Olympics, but he insisted. Ended up, his performances were a little bit up and down, but he really fought hard and ended up racing 5 times. So credit for him. The 2 female athletes, Yasmina Dabakh in the 100 meters, was eliminated, but I think she's the first of many, I think, Saudis who will come forward.
And I think she was one of the flag bearers, I think, wasn't she, for the team?
She was, alongside the rower Hussein Ali Rida. They were the 2 who carried the flag bearer.
Yeah, I mean, you got to admit, it was very exciting to watch all this. I mean, it was phenomenal. Wasn't it very inspiring? And I know that Arab audiences in Saudi Arabia and all over really got into it. Was there a big following? Do you think the Arab world was watching this more than they have been in prior Olympics?
I think certain things happened that attracted a lot of people early on, which was really good. I think one of the landmark things for events for Arab athletes was the Tunisian 18-year-old swimmer Ahmed Hafnawi. He won early on. He won in the 400-meter freestyle. He won a gold, and it was an absolutely incredible achievement because in the qualifiers he had qualified, but he was one of the slowest qualifiers. But then he went on and I think he shaved off 3 seconds from his own personal best, and the coverage that got on social media and on the news really sort of inspired a lot of people, attracted a lot of people. And after that, there was a really cool video that came out of his family watching him race to the final, the final leg to win the race, and so that went viral, and a lot of people were interested in that. So that kind of thing, and then obviously with the Saudis starting to compete, with the Tunisians, with the Egyptians starting to compete, more and more, I think people by the end were very, very interested in what was going on.
All right, we're going to take our quick final last break, Ali, and when we come back, we're going to continue talking with Ali Mohamed Khaled about the Arabs competing in the Tokyo Olympics and what impact coronavirus had. I mean, with no audience, I can't imagine. Now, I'm a political person. I'm not a sports person. For me, politics is sports. But for Ali, who is a superb editor, our sports editor for Arab News with a lot of experience based in Dubai, sports is the prime focus. But for someone like me, I'm thinking, okay, in the few times that I played in sports, I needed an audience out there. Otherwise, what was the point of competing? So we're going to talk about what impact it had not to have that big audience the way they've had at other Olympics. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking with Ali Mohamed Khaled, the sports editor and writer for Arab News, about the Arabs and their performance at the Tokyo Olympics. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937. Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights. The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio, and we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And welcome back to the radio show. I am Ray Hanania, and we're on the line with Ali Mohamed Khaled, who is the Dubai-based sports editor and writer for Arab News. We're looking at the Tokyo Olympics. Ali, again, thank you for joining us. I mean, it's such a fascinating topic, and being Arab all over the world, I think Arabs are so proud to see all these Arab countries, 18 of them, participating in the Tokyo Olympics and sports. It just makes our image look so much better. Sports, so much better than politics, even though you're in the right field, Ali. I'm not. I'm in politics. Politics is just an ugly mess. Sports is beautiful. Tell us a little bit about some of the countries that participated and how well they did in the Olympics.
So I think in total, the number of medals that was won by Arab countries was 18.
That's phenomenal. I'd love to hear that. That's great.
It's really, really good. I mean, it beats the previous best, which was 8. So they. I mean, it's the total for a whole tournament. In the past, it was 8, and so there was 18
wow.
this year. So it's a big improvement. Of course, there is still obviously room for improvement on that. But it was got 5 golds, 5 silvers, and 8 bronze medals. It was good. I mean, it's quite a nice spread, I think. I think to get 5 goals was quite good. And don't forget, again, we mentioned the Saudi karate by Tariq Hamdi was within seconds, really. He had it, and unfortunately, because of the penalty, he got a silver.
That was such an exciting, competition there to watch. It was just really exciting. It was phenomenal.
And that same day, which was the second to last day of the whole competition, was quite a good one for Arab athletes. Ferial Abdelaziz, who's also a female karate competitor for Egypt, she actually won gold, and she was fantastic. She she had 4 matches in the morning in her pool. She beat everyone, and I think she maybe lost one, she won all her matches, I think. And she was confident right from the beginning. She was strong, and then she as soon as she qualified from her pool, she knew she guaranteed a bronze medal, because whatever happened in the semi-final, you guaranteed a bronze. But then she just kept going. She won the semi-final, she got to the final, and she won that. So that was another great performance. The previous day, another Egyptian female athlete, Gianna Lutfi, she also won in the karate. She won a bronze as well. Unfortunately, lost her semi-final, but that guaranteed her a bronze. So, and obviously we mentioned Ahmed Hafnawi, the Tunisian who won at the beginning. There was a Kuwaiti shooter who won bronze as well. There was, a few others. Obviously, I won't go through all 18, but it was very encouraging.
As Arabs, it's great. I'm going to tell you, as Arabs, all the different countries is phenomenal. But as Arabs, and what was the record? This is a record number of medals, you said?
For Arab countries, yes.
Which is a total, again?
18.
So we had 18 countries, and we got 18 medals, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were concentrated, but Egypt helped us a little bit,
they've been in it since, 1910. They've been doing this forever. Not all these Arab countries have been going to the, Olympics as long as some of the other countries. So I can see us doing even better. What was it like, though, do you think, for athletes in terms of not having the audience? There was nobody really out there except maybe family and a few friends and their coaches.
I think, the COVID, the disruptions by COVID, it worked 2 ways, I think. First of all, I think the major disruptions of everyone was expecting to compete last year, and to postpone it by a year, it does really damage athletes' programs. Although in some cases, some athletes who weren't going last year ended up getting the chance this year, so that was a positive for them. But it really did disrupt. Instead of the 4-year cycle, which athletes train to almost religiously, it ended up being a 5-year cycle. So that was one aspect. But I think obviously what you mentioned was the big one, and not just for the athletes themselves playing in front, without the inspiration of the crowd. I think for the watching audiences as well. I mean, some of the greatest Olympic moments are because of what the fans, that's the atmosphere was like in the stadium. Marathon runners coming in and being cheered on and so on. So not having the fans, not having the noise and the inspiration, that I think affected the athletes for sure. I mean, it's less less encouragement, and I think also it affected how we viewed it on television. It was really interesting. I think that a lot of the passion and the excitement was transferred to social media. A lot of people were posting their views, their congratulations, world leaders. The Egyptian president, congratulated on Twitter. He congratulated his athletes. In Saudi, people were congratulating Tariq Hamdi. So there was a lot of excitement on social media. And people were posting videos of themselves or their families celebrating, because in the stadium there was none of that. There is one moment I would like to mention.
Sure.
I think for me was the best moment of the Olympics. I think, and it deserves a big mention, was in the men's high jump competition. There was the Qatari Moataz Barshin was competing against the Italian Gianmarco Tamberi, and they're really good friends, the two of them. They both had lots of injuries, and in the final leg of the competition, they both cleared 2 meter 37 centimeters, but neither of them could go higher. So they were given the option of competing against each other to see who wins the gold. And then the Qatari athlete, said something which was, Moataz Barshin said something which was, I think it's become a bit of a famous saying. He just said, "Can we have 2 golds?" And in the competition, it's allowed if you want. So both of them ended up receiving golds, and that was one of the high points of the tournament. It really showed what the spirit of the Olympics was about.
Yeah, so the big story, the big headline, I think, out of the Tokyo Olympics, largest number of Arab athletes in competition. 18 Arab countries and winning the almost, more than doubling the number of medals that were brought back to the Arab world, 18. Yeah. That's phenomenal. 5 gold, you said.
5 gold, 5 silvers, and 8 bronze.
5 gold, 5 silver, and 8 bronze. That's something to be very proud about. Does anybody stand out? I mean, a lot of times the Olympics is a platform for somebody their career to really shoot out there. Did anybody from our group really kind of...
I'd go for 3 above all else, who really were inspirational. I've already mentioned them, but Ahmed Hafnawi, the Tunisian 18-year-old swimmer, I think he was quite inspirational, an absolutely incredible performance to win gold, but also inspired and raised the spirits of, in his own words, he raised the spirits of a country that was going through a tough time, politically going through a tough time. So he inspired them. So he was that. I think I mentioned Perial Abdelaziz, the Egyptian karate player who also won gold. I mean, I expect her legacy to be quite big in Egypt. I think a lot of people will follow her example. And I think in Saudi, the final one is Tariq Hamdi, Saudi's only medal at the Olympics, I think, was he put on an unbelievable show, and it was a shame that he lost in the circumstances that he lost, through a penalty. But I think it will inspire, a whole new generation of kids to look at him and think, it's not just competing is incredible, and the Olympics a lot of the time is about competing, but it's also about if you win, just the knock-on effect, the positivity that sends back to the sporting industry in your country is huge.
And I know we got many more Olympics to come, and it's going to be great to see a lot of them and probably more new faces. I'm hoping we have even more Arab athletes competing from more countries, because I think it does a lot of good to encourage people to do good stuff. Any final thoughts at all, Ali, before we say thank you?
Just a quick final thought. I think I go along with you. I think we look forward to, sometimes people get a bit cynical about the Olympics, about the spending and, legacies and all that. But then when you see the joy that these athletes get when they actually win, it's all worthwhile. And I would say one thing, it's, competing, it is about competing, but more and more, we'd like to see Arabs also win, not just compete. We'd like them to be better and win medals.
I'm going to be telling everybody we had 18 countries, we had the largest contingent, and we won 18 medals. That makes me feel good, and I bet every year, whether they're in the West, they're in the Middle East, or here in the United States, we should all be proud. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to talk about this more, but we only have 1 hour of radio. So, it was a real pleasure to have you on the radio this morning.
Take care.
All right, Ali Mohamed Khaled is the Dubai-based sports editor and writer for Arab News. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. It was it leaves me with a smile on my face. Politics doesn't always do that, but sports does. Thank you so much, Ali. All right, this is the end of the show. I just want to thank everybody. Listen, you can watch this program later by going to facebook.com/Arab News. We also have a podcast. If you go to the Arab News website at arabnews.com, on the right side, you'll see the link to the podcast. We'll have that podcast up there so that you can listen to this show and all our past shows. We really appreciate all your support, listening to us and emailing us and sending us ideas and feedback. We welcome all that. So thank you so much, everybody, for being out there and supporting our radio show. We're broadcast, as you know, live on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit and WDMV AM 700 in Washington, D.C. We want to also thank former Ambassador Gerald Feierstein. He was the former ambassador to Yemen, who in the first segment helped us understand all the dynamics of what's happening in that conflict there. I'm Ray Hanania. We will see you again next Wednesday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. in Dubai, 4 p.m. in Riyadh. We will talk to you again. You guys, I think it's 3 p.m. in Riyadh and 4 p.m. in Dubai. Listen, you have a great time. We'll talk to you next week on Wednesday. Bye-bye, everybody.